Welcome. Today we're going to look together at my favourite painting. It's one of the last paintings that Rembrandt painted. It was found with other paintings in his studio after he had died, so he was working on it probably right to the end. It is, of course, his depiction of the return of the Prodigal Son. It's a painting I've been looking at for many years. I've never seen the original. That's hanging in the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg. I think it's a painting that you become involved in. If you look at it over any length of time, you tend in the end, as it were, to step into it and to take your place, to take up a position in relation to the characters that are here in the painting. And that position and place can change over time. And at the end of this video, I'll give you the opportunity to do that. But I think that's best done when we really stop to take a look and think about what it is that Rembrandt is wanting to do when he gives us this image. And the obvious place to start then is with the parable itself, the story, the return of the prodigal son, the story that Jesus told. It's a story of a father with two sons, and one of them asks the father to give him now the share of the inheritance that is due to the son on the father's death. The father does so, and the son goes off to a far country, wastes all the money, comes to his senses and realizes that things are better at home even for the servants, let alone a son, so he begins to make his way home. The father comes out to meet him and embraces him, brings him back into the house and throws a big party for him. The older brother comes in from the fields and hears all the noise and is affronted to learn that this is a party in honour of his wastrel brother. So he stays outside the house, and the father comes out and remonstrates with him. The elder brother says, I've worked for you all these years, you've never given me a party, and this wasteful son of yours, you do this for him. And the parable ends with the father remonstrating outside the house with the son and saying, you know, that's as may be, but son, you are always with me. We had to rejoice when your brother came home, because he was lost and is found, he was dead and is alive. And that's where the parable ends. So what has Rembrandt done with that story? Well, the first thing Rembrandt's done is to compress the action. He can't show all those journeys and movements and toings and froings in one image. So he has brought the moment when the father embraces the son into the house, and indeed the elder brother is also here. So Rembrandt's compressed the action, but he's retained and shown in the postures and the facial features and the positioning of the different characters the underlying emotion, psychology, spirituality of the parable. But there's a layer of meaning below the parable which Rembrandt is aware of and which we can get to if we just ask the simple question, why did Jesus tell this parable? Who did he think he was referring to in these figures of the prodigal son, the father and the elder brother? And we find a clue right at the beginning of the chapter in the Bible in which this story is told. In Luke's Gospel, chapter 15 and verse 1, we read this. Tax collectors and sinners, for tax collectors we should read collaborators with the hated Romans and cheats. And sinners, well, that's people who've fallen well short of the accepted moral standards of the day. Tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus. And the Pharisees and the scribes, that's the religious teachers and leaders, were grumbling and saying, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. And the next verse in Luke's Gospel says, so, or then, Jesus told them this parable. And in fact, he tells three parables about a lost sheep and a lost coin, and then this parable about a lost son. And in every case, at the end of the parable, there's a call to others to rejoice, because that which was lost has been found. So when Jesus tells this parable, he isn't just telling a good story. In its characters and its plot, he is putting into a drama the situation that he is involved in. He's operating with different levels of meaning. And Rembrandt knows all this. Rembrandt is well familiar with this story and with the biblical text. He draws it, he etches it, he paints it on numerous occasions. He's sat in church and listened to sermons about this story. So he's well up with this kind of layer of meaning, understanding. And as we look at these characters, we'll see how these different layers are seen and impinge and come to the fore at different places in Rembrandt's picture. Let's start here with the prodigal. And in Jesus' ministry we see here an echo of the tax collectors and sinners coming to him and perhaps being amazed to find themselves welcomed. And what a figure this prodigal is. He kneels, his sandals are all broken, his clothes are in tatters. He's lost the red family robe that both his father and his brother wear. His head shaven like a convict. His face is only half seen, but he presses his face into the father's chest, almost as if seeking to know and wondering if he can really believe that the father's heart still beats with love for him, after all that he, the prodigal, has done, and the shame he's brought on the family. And who is this looking on? Well, of course, it's the elder brother. But in the parable, the elder brother has come in from the fields, been working on the father's estate, on the farm perhaps. And that isn't so much what I see here. But what I do see here is a Pharisee. And people wonder who this character here is. And various suggestions have been made. Well, I don't know, but when I look at these two together, I just see an echo of that biblical phrase, the terrible duo, the scribes and the Pharisees. They remind me of a kind of bureaucracy, a powerful institution. This one has his hands folded across as if he's clutching the book of rules. They look as if they're critically finding out whether everything on the other side of the painting is being done properly and according to due process. There's tremendous power on this side of the painting. And Rembrandt's done something very clever about height and also about distance. I think if these three characters stood next to each other on a level surface, they might be a very similar height. But because the prodigal is kneeling, and because the father is bending over him, while the elder brother is standing very rigid and upright and has been placed by Rembrandt on two steps, on a kind of platform here, he towers over this side of the painting. And he has this stick. The father's hands are gently parted as he embraces his son, and also opens his cloak as if to reveal his heart. Not so the elder brother. His hands tightly grip this stick. His cloak is held together. He is upright and uptight. And if there's something here about height and power, there's something about distance as well. There's a telling little detail in the parable that Jesus tells. When the father goes out to talk to the elder brother at the end, the elder brother talks about this son of yours, whereas the father responds with the phrase, this brother of yours. In other words, the elder brother wants to put distance between himself and his brother, but the father wants to bring them together. And so in that point in the parable where the father goes out to talk to the son, isn't Jesus reaching across, as it were, to the scribes and Pharisees and saying, these tax collectors that you despise, really, you're not a million miles apart. You're brother and sister. But we might ask, why are the Pharisees and the scribes so affronted by the ministry of Jesus to tax collectors and sinners? Why is the elder brother so annoyed about the father's welcome and forgiveness and receiving of the prodigal son? Well, that brings us to the deepest level of meaning of all, within the parable and within the ministry of Jesus, which is a dispute, a severe disagreement about the nature of God and about who it is who can best claim to be representing God, doing God's will here on earth, acting in God's name and with God's approval. The abba, the father of whom Jesus speaks, he characterizes as the kind of God who runs out to meet returning sinners, is overjoyed that they have come back, throws a big party for them. For the Pharisees, this is very threatening. God is not that sort of God. He is a God who stands aloof, apart, upright, and would have nothing to do with such people. It does appear that Jesus sees himself as in some way representing the God that he calls Abba, Father, indeed more than that, embodying and presencing that God. There's a little incident in John's Gospel where one of Jesus' disciples says, "Well, show us this Father," and Jesus says, "If you have seen me, you have seen the Father." Jesus says in these parables that there is joy in heaven over the returning sinners. Far from God disapproving of Jesus' welcome and eating with the tax collectors and sinners, Jesus' action mirrors the fact that there's a party going on in heaven too. Another telling phrase from that interaction at the end of the parable between the father and the elder brother is when the elder brother says, "I've worked all these years for you." And I think in that phrase Jesus is going out towards the Pharisees and the scribes and saying, "I understand what you feel. You feel that for centuries you have guarded the religious traditions, and here is this upstart newcomer who seems to be playing fast and loose with the traditions that you hold dear. But come on in and join the party." But is that invitation accepted or rejected? People often say that in the parable we're not told at the end whether the elder brother came in. True enough, but as the ministry of Jesus unfolded, we do know what the response of the Pharisees and the scribes was. It was after Jesus had told parables like this that they plotted to do away with him. Jesus' view of God was too much for them. And as we think about views of God, and as we come to this figure, are there any signs in the way that Rembrandt has portrayed this father that Rembrandt intends not only the father of two sons in a story Jesus told, but also behind and beneath that, God, seen as the Abba that Jesus claims to teach about and disclose in his ministry? Many people have noticed something about Rembrandt's depiction of the Father's hands. The Father's left hand on our right as we look is seemingly more masculine, his right hand on our left more feminine, as if an echo of the God of the opening chapters of Genesis, who creates male and female in his own image. And look at the face of this father. In the parable that Jesus tells, the emphasis is all on the joy of the father in finding again that which was lost. Maybe so, but here we see that there is cost and pain too. This is an old man, burdened by days and nights of watching and wondering, waiting, hoping for his son's return. I've sometimes thought, looking at this image, that it's almost as if the prodigal is thudding into the father's chest as he comes back and doubling the father over, as if even the return has its element of cost for the father. If this is an image, as it were, of God, it is a God who is acquainted with suffering and with grief, as Jesus indeed was. There's a particularly interesting detail if we look very closely at this eye, the Father's right eye. This is an eye which is, well, near blind. It's what we might call a lazy eye. Rembrandt's fascinated by vision and by the way that even as outer vision begins to dim, there can be an inner vision which is equally or more important. From the Pharisees' point of view, a father who seems to turn a blind eye and intentionally not notice certain things. If so, this is a God who sees what matters most of all. Well, we've looked together at the different levels and layers of meaning in Rembrandt's painting. And I suppose all that's left are the layers of meaning and interpretation that we, the observers, now bring. There are already some observers in the painting, actually. There's a woman right at the back of the painting. Perhaps she's the mother of the household, or perhaps she's a household servant. And then there's this person. And when I look at that person, they seem to be as far behind the action as I am in front, almost mirroring my position and looking at me and saying, "What do you make of this?" I find myself wondering what Rembrandt made of his painting the last time he looked at it before he died. Rembrandt sometimes puts his own face on the face of a character in his paintings. I don't think he's done that here, but in another sense, Rembrandt's everywhere here. Rembrandt was someone who had made a fortune and lost it. Rembrandt was a father who had known great loss, the death of many of his children in infancy. His loved son Titus died the year before Rembrandt, and Titus was only 26. Rembrandt had been disciplined by religious leaders, thrown out of church by the authorities because of his dissolute lifestyle. Rembrandt himself could be a bit cold-hearted and mean-spirited in some of his dealings with people. I wonder if at the end Rembrandt found a sense of peace with God, a kind of coming home. For myself, looking at this painting over the years, I find that sometimes I'm here, which for a Christian we would call confession, which can be caricatured as grovelling or low self-image, but at its best is simply acknowledging the mess that we make, and is easiest and safest done when you know that you'll be received and forgiven in love. When I used to be a church leader, I used to sometimes ask myself, which side am I on? Is the ministry that I'm involved with looking like this, open and welcoming of people in their brokenness, including my own brokenness? Or am I ever over here, critical, judgmental? And of course what's over here isn't all bad. Morality, uprightness are important and are part of the family likeness, as it were. And a subtle way to avoid the challenge of this is to try to put distance between myself and the Pharisee. Thank goodness I'm not like that. And as soon as I do that, of course, I am like that, because I'm just putting distance between us. So there's something very subtle and important to reflect on here. This isn't just about horrible, nasty people. It's about what's in every human heart, isn't it? And most important of all for me over the years has come to be this area here. Somebody once described faith and prayer as learning to keep company with a God whose heart knows no bounds. And I've often thought, what would it be like to be in this place, even in the midst of a busy life or many demands, to be remaining here, as it were, listening out for the heartbeat of God. Well, that's Rembrandt and that's me, which just leaves you. Perhaps the best thing I can do after all these words and thoughts that I've given you is to get myself out of the way and to leave you with the painting. So that's what I'll do. I'll put up the painting itself, a few close-ups, and back to the painting, just so that you can have a good look for yourself and make your own responses. And of course you could always press the pause button if you want to take a little bit longer. But thanks for watching this video, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And I'm going to leave you now to see for yourself.